All right, everybody. Again, welcome. Good to have you all here tonight as we begin. I want to welcome both of our guest panelists tonight who have expertise and knowledge in the area of Sewage and Water Board that we're discussing tonight, and also some meaningful reforms that are being placed on the table, such as what the Water Collaborative is doing. So first, I want to present to most of you who know our dear friend, the Councilmember Joe Giarrusso, very well, introduced to others. But I would like to ask Councilmember if you just tell us briefly an introduction of yourself.
Oh gosh. Well, hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Giarrusso. Been married for 20 years in July. Got two teenage daughters. Anybody's got secret sauce on that, I will take it from you. I've now been elected for 7 years, serving for 6. And obviously, I think these quality of life issues that are confronting the city, as Pastor alluded to in his prayer, are what's most important we ought to be doing to try to make people's lives as easy as possible.
All right. Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate that introduction. And so glad to have you here with us today. You always show up when we call on you, and we appreciate that. Our next guest panelist tonight is Rebecca Malpass. Rebecca, please let me know if I'm saying your last name correctly. Is it Malpass?
It's Malpass, yes.
All right. All right. Welcome. We appreciate you being here today. Would you give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Rebecca Malpass, I am the Director of Policy and Research for the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. For those who don't know our organization, you may know our fearless leader, Jessica Dandridge. She's all over the place. She's a native of New Orleans. Many people work with her and love her. But we are the leading urban water management nonprofit in Louisiana, essentially. So while a lot of water organizations are focused on coastal issues, we are really focused on infrastructure issues, lead service line replacement, things that we call water justice issues, such as water affordability, water accessibility, water quality. And so I'm just really excited to be here tonight. We work often with our water utility, not always in tandem with our water utility, but we are always trying to hold them accountable as best we can. We work in stormwater and flood management, of course, and so I'm excited to be here and talk to you all tonight.
All right, Rebecca, thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate the work you're doing and the giving of your time to be here tonight. Council member, the bulk of the first set of questions are going to be for you, and Rebecca, when you're able to chime in on these questions, I'd appreciate that. But we know Council member needs to leave by 5:45, so we're just going to get it rolling here and see what we got. Council member, we know that there has been much talk of restructuring of the governance of Sewage and Water Board, but I think because there's been so much talk and going back and forth with what the governor is proposing and what the council wants to do, people may not have clarity on what exactly is the governance of Sewage and Water Board going forward. What's going to happen as far as the governance of Sewage and Water Board? What do you got?
It's a great question. It really boils down to right now, two different types of thought. One is at the state level, there's a lot of discussion about taking over Sewage and Water Board, and that would be the state or some related entity doing that. The city and the council have been widely panning that and think that's an awful decision. And I don't think it takes a lot of explanation of why that's the case. But for those who would want to argue, well, maybe it would be better. We've had these failures for so long. It would be better for the state to do it. And I would just say that I don't think people who live in Abbeville or Kaplan or Rayville have a real sense of what happens here, what we're all doing, how it all works, how things have changed, what needs to happen in the future. And I worry about the idea that people who aren't from the local area would be on top of that. I will also just say this, and I'm not saying this to try and be officious or abrasive, but I also think that the press failed the public in explaining certain things, particularly a proposed bill by a member of the local delegation who I like personally, but there is a bill that's still around that would allow Sewage and Water Board takeover for a year. And initially, the discussion was, well, this is not a takeover, and I just want to read a little bit of it to you because it's 100% a takeover, even though it's unlikely to happen. So the beginning part is the reformative entity for the New Orleans panel hereafter um, is hereby created. Here's the important language: to assume the responsibilities of the New Orleans Sewage and Water Board for the next year. I mean, I don't know how you could be any clearer about what your purpose is than to say assume the responsibilities. Then just read a little bit of the next section. The public water system, the public sewage system, and the public drainage system of the city of New Orleans shall be, again, mandatory, shall be constructed, controlled, maintained, and operated by the panel. That's takeover, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how to say it any differently. The panel may exercise any and all powers and duties granted to the board, which is the Sewage and Water Board. The board provided for shall serve in an advisory capacity. So I say all of this because this bill is still pending and has not gone out of sight yet. It is 100% a takeover. And while I expect that it will either be withdrawn or ultimately killed, it's still out there lingering. So that's in the realm of potential. I put it at small scale. I don't know, Rebecca, if you have different things you're hearing. The only other major piece on the governance side, and there's some other bills to reform billing, and I'm sure Pastor Manning will get to those in a second. The other piece would be to consolidate drainage into one place, and that would be on Sewage and Water Board side. Senator Harris has that bill that would take drainage. Remember, Department of Public Works has the drainage from the catch basins to the smaller pipe and any pipe that is less than 36 inches round. And then Sewage and Water Board has jurisdiction over the pipes 36 inches to the canals and for the power. So what winds up happening frequently in a storm? Well, the catch basin wasn't clean. Was the power on? Had the canal been pumped down? So you have two entities kind of trying to do this. And candidly, while Sewage and Water Board has had failures before with its power and other things, it also gets blamed if there are Department of Public Work issues like the catch basins not being cleaned or the lateral lines, those smaller interior lines not being cleaned properly. So the new bill from Senator Harris would say we've had enough of all of that, and we're going to take all of the drainage system out of the city of New Orleans and put it into Sewage and Water Board. And I, as I understand it, again, I'm here on the ground locally, so I can give you a fairly good sense of kind of what the council might be thinking or the administration on certain issues. So I'm giving you kind of hearsay within hearsay here, but my understanding is that bill has strong support from the local delegation, from the other legislators, and even from the governor's office. So I would expect that bill to likely pass. So to answer the pastor's question, the governance thing that is likely to happen is taking drainage, instead of having it in two places, consolidating it in one. And then the thing that I think is far less likely to happen, but until the bill goes away, there's still a bill out there that potentially targets a takeover of Sewage and Water Board for a year. And like I said, there's some bills on billing I'm happy to talk about, but Rebecca, I didn't know if you had anything else on governance that you thought I'd missed or was important.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you, Councilmember Giarrusso. I just want to sort of reiterate what you said, and I do think you explained the drainage situation very clearly. We do have a problem. It should be consolidated. I can say the Water Collaborative is also on board with that, very much so, and would help with a lot of the issues that we have around cross-departmental miscommunication, resident miscommunication and understanding, to the point of the governance structure of the Sewage and Water Board itself. I agree that we don't know what's going to happen with that. To be honest, I think the governor right now is very focused on this constitutional convention. And so we sort of put that on the back burner. sort of remains as is unless, as Councilmember Giarrusso said, certain pieces of legislation are passed. I know we've been talking about Representative Alonzo Knox's bill. There's also Representative Stephanie Hilferty's bill that places the authority in the hands of City Council directly. Senator Jimmy Harris's bill. Each of these in their own way attempt to restructure the board or create some sort of oversight committee for this. I think that each of them are incomplete and aren't necessarily forward thinking. What happens after that 1 year, for example? Where do we go from there? Who gains control of that board? It also, none of them, besides the one that says City Council should have control, say who should be that authority. There's no premise where it says there must be local expertise and local authority on these committees or on these boards, which is a huge problem because, again, to Councilmember Giarrusso's point, that's a state-controlled takeover, right? Who is going to make decisions? It certainly, you know, if it's going to be outside forces making decisions for people who actually live in the city. And so we definitely need change, right? When the mayor appoints you to do a job and then sits next to you in every meeting on that board, eyeing your every vote, your every decision, your every opinion, that creates a huge conflict of interest and an abuse of power that definitely needs reconciliation. It needs to be changed. But again, what should that look like? I think that these bills are really, really incomplete. And I think it should be made up of local expertise, community members who live here, who will make decisions, good decisions on behalf of the community.
Pastor Manning, can I jump in for 1 second?
Please.
Just
Yes.
to round out Rebecca's really good answer here, which is I think people need to understand the supermajority of the Sewage and Water Board as currently constituted is appointed by the mayor. So there are 2 appointments that come from the Board of Liquidation. The Board of Liquidation is a separate created entity that controls all of the city's debt and makes sure that the city can never ever default on its debt obligations that happen. So you have 2 members who are from that. You have 1 city council member, 1. So that's 3 people. And all the rest of the appointments include the mayor or belong to the mayor. So that is the current construction of the board. And essentially you have 1 person who has to live in each district. So A through E, that's supposed to be the geographical, physical, ethnic diversity, also some diversity based on professions. And then there's a couple positions open to advocates as well, but almost all of that is in a supermajority, whoever the mayor of the city of New Orleans at the time appoints.
All right. And that appointed council member right now is that yourself?
No, it's Councilmember King. Look, I just really candidly, I was always worried about serving on the board, to Rebecca's point, of either one of 2 things was going to happen. 1, because you're sitting so close to whoever the mayor is that you become subsumed by what the mayor wants you to do, or 2, you're almost always a naysayer. And so what kind of progress can you really make? And I'm not faulting anybody for serving on it because somebody has to do it. But I was always worried about how I can kind of exercise that independence of, this is the criticism. And if they deserve the good critique, then I want to be able to give that. And if they deserve the bad stuff, then I want to be able to not feel bound.
All right. Understood. Thank you for those very complete answers. I appreciate that. Very good. Next question is, what are the basic terms of the Sewage and Water Board Task Force report? Council member.
So the task force, again, was something that the governor created, and the reason why I'm chuckling is because the council in particular was frustrated. There was not a single local elected official to serve on that task force. And let me be super clear about saying this. That is not saying that Joe is the right person to serve on that. I have many colleagues who know just as much, if not more, than I do, whether they serve in the legislature, whether they serve on the council, whether they serve in some other capacity. But my deep concern is really this. People hate politics until you need politics in order to solve certain problems. And the bottom line is I have to respond to the needs of the constituency to whom I serve. And people who do not have an elected constituency are not bound by that same parameter. So the task force was set up of, you had some people from the governor's office, you had some technical advisors, you had business people, you had Sewage and Water Board itself, and they had 3 meetings. I think one meeting was sort of talking through the most significant problems. The second meeting was to receive public comment, and then the third meeting was to start summarizing what they found. I would say this again, subject to Rebecca pushing back on me. I think a fair amount of the things, I would not say all, were points where there was probably agreement between the city, the council, and the task force. Nobody's going to say billing is working well and that we ought to uplift Sewage and Water Board for what a great job it's doing with billing. Okay. I think that is almost a universally held view. And I also think the fact that their billing has been so bad for such a long time is a drag on their credibility for every other thing that happens. So billing is something we agreed about. The need to make sure that drainage didn't live in so many different places is something we agreed about. The fact that the city was not spending money fast enough on cleaning catch basins was something that we agreed about. I would say the major sore point between both sides is this takeover thing. And look, I'll just tell you what I'm hearing is I think that there is a group that would be more than happy to take over Sewage and Water Board and are concerned about how it's been operated, both in terms of the work that it's done for people and in terms of how bad the billing is. At the same time, there is a political issue too, because once the state takes it over, the local officials get to say, it's all your problem now. I'm not responsible for this anymore. You want the broken thing, you own it. So they don't completely want that. So what I think they're trying to do is figure out what is the world that they can live in where either they say we've had enough, we've just reached a point and we're willing to accept all of that political risk, or insert themselves to some degree to have some manner of control. But I think that has been really the largest push-pull between the council, at least, and the task force and the governor's office. And let me just say one other thing that's sort of undergirding all of this too is Sewage and Water Board, to a degree, and the business people to a degree, keep on blaming the council and the public for not properly funding Sewage and Water Board. I'm not going to sit here and say that Sewage and Water Board at every single point in the last 60, 50 years has been perfectly funded. But what I will say is that Sewage and Water Board got increases on sewer and water 10% on each system from 2012 to 2020. That was supposed to be $583 million. And if you ask the public what you got in return for that, what do you get? I don't know. I mean, that's a response that I get from most people, and even I have trouble articulating. So that's number one. And I would say, number two is, again, it goes back to the billing issue. This is my personal belief that as New Orleanians, we have a high capacity. We may literally be the most forgiving, charitable people when it comes to infrastructure of any major American city, and say, we understand it takes 6 months, 9 months to fill a pothole or to fix this thing. Sure, that we understand that. But when you hit people in their pocketbook, and when you see that I have a bad bill and it takes such a long time to get that bad bill fixed, then people shoot off, rightfully so, like a bottle rocket. And just to round out my answer, we just put out a little survey today about quality of life issues and what's going on. And before I got on the call, I wanted to see, we had over 166 people who responded. Of those people who responded, 71% said they've had a bad Sewage and Water Board bill. I mean, that is a staggeringly high number. When you look, you can argue self-selection, you can argue how many people are from District A, but the bottom line is the billing, in my view, is eating up so much of the bandwidth that we all have. It hasn't been resolved nearly the way that it ought to be, and that you're going to continue, in my view, to hear about a takeover until this major financial piece is resolved and
Yeah.
resolved to ratepayers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could talk about billing all, I mean, for all day, taking the bulk of this meeting. I mean, the fact is people are ticked off, and I'm personally just, council member, the issues that I've said to you that we've talked about, is that it's plaguing our elderly people, our low income people, everybody. And I guess just people want to know why, and why hasn't it been fixed? What's the reason it hasn't been fixed? And when do we get it fixed? And how do people trust that this is just not being done? At least I think, maybe I'm paranoid, I don't know, but I think at a certain point that this has to be being done intentionally to to figure out how to get more money into the city coffers, into the city sewage water board coffers. If this is if we're seeing for so long the failure for this to be remedied, it is toxic. It is just unacceptable. So when do we see a change?
Can I answer the first part of what you said first?
Yes. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who don't appreciate that the people who have time, network, agency to fight all the bills can do that. And that the largest amount of New Orleanians do not have those things. And so they are the ones who are either being punished because they have to pay the bills just to get Sewage and Water Board to go away, or they're burdened by having bad credit or by having all of these issues. And I honestly think that is a major disconnect between people who are on this call, elected officials, and what's going on at Sewage and Water Board. I also believe that they thought at different points we've got a handle on all of this and that it's all going to be solved, and it hasn't been. And honestly, I have reached a point now of saying I usually want to resolve things within systems and work with people and hopefully collaborate before the finger starts getting wagged. But I'm really ready for an independent, whether it's accounting firm or law firm, to come in and just for 6 to 9 months take over the billing system and say this is how we're gonna remedy these bills. I don't have faith anymore that it has the capability to be done in house. That we have too many bills that are wrong. I got my bill. Look, we got our bill yesterday. I have two alleged actual reads. One is for 5 days. One is for 50 days. Neither one meets the criteria for what a billing cycle ought to be under the law the council passed. Neither one. And that's me being able to read this and tell my wife, so what's going on. So at this point, I am willing to dedicate city resources to say, how do we find somebody that's going to come in within the next period of time that we can't afford to wait till the smart meters come online in 2 years and fix everything and get it taken care of.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think many people that are on this call and that will be listening to this are with you as well. Enough is enough. It has gone on too long. To add insult to injury, I think for many people, and it is that who are in the know, done the research, heard about it. We know that the executive director of Sewage and Water Board is Giarrusso Corbin. Is that the correct title, executive director?
Correct.
So in 2020, from what we understand, received an increase in salary to the point that his salary was at that time $322,000 some odd dollars, and then received another increase in 2024, making his salary $348,000. When I heard that the other day, I was curious. I said, well, let me see what the president of the United States makes. Incidentally, it's $400,000. You know, it's a big difference. A lot of perks there, as we know. But I just use that as a benchmark comparison. But help the people that are listening today understand, what Mr. Corbin has done significantly to warrant two increases when the people of New Orleans are suffering greatly from the lack of integrity and ability to handle the issues that they're dealing with?
Well, this is a trick question because I've already answered it. So for those of you who haven't seen when this first was reported, I think the term I used was tone deaf for the press, and that's what I believe that it is. Look, the bottom line is when you work in public service, you have to be dedicated to the work, and you also know that that means you are not getting paid top dollar to be doing the things that you could be doing otherwise. And while we have this issue with not having operational things the way that they ought to be, when we know that people are paying such high rates, when we know that we have drainage issues that are happening, when we say that we don't have enough money for A or B, I mean, think about it also in this context, Pastor, too. Like the timing was really bad because right after this issue came forward, what happened next? Sewage and Water Board came to us, and I see some people shaking their head because they know where I'm headed, is, oh, well, we underbid or we didn't realize there were things that were needed for the power station, and now we're in the whole $20 million in addition to that. Now, his salary increase isn't going to make up for that difference, but it doesn't send a good message that we're raising your salary, and on the other hand, we're asking the city to cough up another 20 million bucks all at one time. So I don't understand the rationale in trying to do that. I don't want people who are in public service to live at or near a poverty level. I don't want people to be without certain things, but at the same time, I know that there have just been too many problems, particularly that hit people in their pocketbook, and particularly this most recent one. Don't understand the rationale behind it.
Absolutely. I think most people would agree, and I'm glad we're on the same page. Want to see if Rebecca, did anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Councilmember Giarrusso said. I will be the first to say that this is a terrible look for Gasson and the board, especially when the median household income in New Orleans is below $60,000 per year. We have deep levels of poverty in this city, and you get paid almost $350,000 per year. And not to mention on top of that, that he got almost, I think, 4.5 months of paid time off through this, which I think was very much a parachute in case things go south and he is sort of let go from Sewage and Water Board. But it's not a good look. We have had so many billing issues. I think to your previous question, Reverend Manning, about the basic terms, I think one thing that maybe should be mentioned too is that something that was concerning to us to see is this potential for increases in rates and even subverting city council's authority to increase rates on customers, particularly without first addressing and fixing the billing disputes that we've been talking about, that I think everybody is very aware of. We first need to recover that money that's putting the Sewage and Water Board in debt, and rely also on the unprecedented amount of available federal funding for infrastructure improvements that we're now seeing through things like the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act. There is so much money available, $55 billion available to improve our water infrastructure. And instead of saying, hey, let's utilize that money, let's leverage that money, let's make sure that we're getting that and fixing our billing disputes, the task force said, let's increase rates, because it's a heck of a lot easier to go to a public service commission or a city council and say, we need a rate increase, than it is to actually get the federal government to give you the money. And so that's what's been happening across the country. And it's a horrible idea. I agree with everything else Joe Giarrusso has said, and so I'll leave it there because I know we have other questions we want to get to.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
Pastor May, can I just say very quickly to Rebecca and I, we promised we didn't rehearse before we got here tonight, but I look, we have lamented this idea too of you're burdening the council with all the accountability for Sewage and Water Board and almost no authority. And if you strip our ability away to control rates as a way to get some of the things we want, just handcuff us completely, because we're never going to have a say in any of this. And look, we are incredibly sensitive, particularly at this moment, at how expensive it is to live here.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We need the council to be incredibly sensitive to that, because from housing to food to insurance, we all know these issues are compounded. So let's talk about trust for a real quick minute. How does the Sewage and Water Board regain trust without a total restructuring? And we're dealing with distrust, the issues across the board: billing, flooding, infrastructure, overspending. We talked about the salary of the executive director. What's the plan in both of your views to regain trust?
Well, look, I think number one, the billing has to be fixed first. If there is something I've proselytized and talked about for forever, it's you got to get the billing fixed. And there really is very hard, if not maybe impossible, to return trust until that happens. Number one. Number two is, as I try and tell all internal and external agencies, if you think you've communicated enough, you haven't, and figure out other ways to communicate more. I've been shocked as somebody who's been elected for 6 or 7 years and thought I've said certain things enough times that people know either where I stand or what an issue has been that people sometimes still does not penetrate. And I think Sewage and Water Board needs to show, I fixed this service cut today. This is a water line that we fixed. Here is sewer work that we did. The thing, for example, that you may have seen on Fox 8 in the paper on Cambronne, they are actually supposed to start tending to in the next couple of weeks. All right, you took the bad media report about it, come back and show people that I actually fixed it and got it taken care of. Number three, the power station that I've advocated for such a long time, newer, cleaner, more reliable power is supposed to be up in 2025. People need to know more about it. People need to know how much cleaner it's going to be, how much more reliable it's going to be. The fact that you're not going to be relying on 100-year-old turbines to be your source of power. And I think the other thing too is you probably need to drill down to basic community levels. And when you go to a neighborhood meeting or come to a meeting like Justice Beyond and say, hey, look, at an overview, I can tell you here are the things that we've done in New Orleans East, in the Lower Nine, in Holy Cross, and Central City, and Chantilly, and Mid City, and parts of Uptown. You tell people, because sometimes you only know my little block and then how I get to work. And it requires people, I think, understanding what's going on. But I think the bottom line kind of we're all saying is until the billing issues are fixed and people feel like there's a good handle on the finances, it's really hard to get credibility established.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Add
Couldn't
to
agree
that.
more. Rebecca.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So, and I'm not here to be a spokesperson for Sewage and Water Board by any means. Our organization many times has been at odds with them because we try to hold them accountable as often as we can. But that said, for those who don't maybe have the historical context, as I mentioned, in this nation, we've had a significant disinvestment in federal funding for water infrastructure over the last 50 odd years. This has meant that the financial burden has been placed on state and local governments and ratepayers, right? We're the ones shouldering the gap in financing to improve our water infrastructure. At the same time, for 30 years, the city council only approved 2 rate increases for Sewage and Water Board around that time. And because of these 2 factors, right, less federal money available and virtually no local money available, Sewage and Water Board has had to delay and defer so many vital infrastructure projects that could protect us for decades. Now, as I mentioned, under the Biden administration, there's a huge amount of money available to do this, and we need to take advantage. But unfortunately, we're not seeing them take advantage. We're not seeing the Sewage and Water Board take advantage as quickly as we'd like them to. The money has been available for 2 years. It's only available for another 3 to 4 years, and then it's gone. So we'd like to see Sewage and Water Board go after that money more aggressively. And I will say, even they've been skeptical of rate increases. They know that's a bad look, and it would just make people really angry to do that. And in terms of community trust, I completely agree with Councilmember Giarrusso. The Sewage and Water Board doesn't do itself any favors We've told them repeatedly they need to focus on community engagement. We've tried to help them do that. They don't talk enough about the things that they're actually doing right, to Councilmember Giarrusso's point. And all anyone really sees, and what the media highlights, of course, are the things that they do wrong. Even when it comes to community meetings, we've asked them to be transparent, right? Like, even if they don't have all the answers, say you're still figuring it out, say you're between two options and here's why, explain to the public why it's taking so long, etc. And they just won't do it. They won't put anything out publicly that isn't definitive. They drag their feet, and I think they sit in fear behind closed doors so much of the time. And it's not doing them any favors to remain silent as often as they do. They didn't even formally apologize for the sex room scandal that happened, that I think all of us might be aware of. They didn't address it, and perhaps they thought they were taking the high road for doing that. But in fact, all it showed was that they aren't willing to hold themselves accountable. They aren't willing to say that they're wrong. And I think it's going to take years to rebuild trust, perhaps even a generation or two. But if they can get their act together, engage with the community more, and be more transparent, I think it is possible. I don't know that a restructuring would fix everything. I think removing the mayor would help with that conflict of interest. I think having some sort of community oversight committee with specific expertise in financing or engineering, sustainability, community engagement, et cetera, could be really helpful. A board like that could actually help them with technical assistance to apply for federal funding, to write competitive RFPs, to negotiate on bids, to help with community trust. I think these kinds of appointments could be really beneficial. But point being, I agree with Councilmember Giarrusso. They don't do themselves any favors. They shoot themselves in the foot, to be honest, even when they do something well.
Yeah. It goes a long way, as you said, Rebecca, to just admit we were wrong. We apologize. We're trying to correct course. And unfortunately, that comes from top down. You have to lead by example. And so, Councilmember, I know you got 3 more minutes with you, right? You got to go at 5:45.
Yes, sir.
Anything that you want to say in regards to just in closing, as in your just leave us with something, maybe something hopeful, maybe something that we can assist with by contacting whoever or working with you.
I know we didn't want the whole conversation to be hijacked by billing, but there are some decent bills actually in the legislature, I think, about billing right now. One of which Representative Hilferty has that would do 2 things. One is have arbitrators to decide billing disputes. That's to try and make things go a lot faster. So that way you're not languishing for forever and you don't know what's going on, so you can go to an arbitrator and get your bill resolved. The second one, this would mimic what energy does. Now, I will be the first to say that it has to be done well, it has to be clear, it has to be predictable, but they have a proposed level billing. So if your bill is $100, that more or less your bill would be close to $100, and you would not get a $100 bill, $100 bill, $100 bill, $5,000 bill, $100 bill, $100 bill. It should stay level at that $100 rate, so you don't see that crazy swing with an actual read or an estimate. The other bill that Representative Willard has would eliminate estimates altogether. That one's kind of interesting because his theory is the smart meters ought to be stood up by the beginning of the year, and then at least half of them, and then every other meter can be actually read. We'll see if that actually happens. But I will say this. I think internally, externally, with political people, you have seen a tipping point now when it comes to billing, and whatever your flavor is on trying to get it resolved, the bottom line is everybody's had enough. And it probably should have reached this point, maybe even a little bit earlier, but we are here now. And I know for myself and for a lot of my colleagues, we want to focus on getting those issues resolved because, another point Rebecca hasn't said yet is Sewage and Water Board is allegedly owed $105 million on its bill. Now, I'm sure a lot of that is bad debt. I'm sure a lot of that is stuff that they could never collect or is bad. But just assume we can collect 15% of that, 20% of that, that's $20 million. And that is real money. That doesn't mean that you get hit with a rate increase or that the city has to come up with more money, or as Pastor Manning said, we got to take money away from affordable housing because we need to come up with for drainage. And so I really do believe that the billing issue is at the top of the mind for everybody. And between the cost of living, insurance rates, groceries, everything else, that we have reached a point of no return when it comes to that. And that between bills in the legislature and what's going on the ground locally, that you're going to start seeing some more significant changes.
All right, people are paying attention on all fronts, and that's good news. And we do hope that it'll be different the next time that we have this conversation. So, Councilmember, we appreciate you as always, and we look forward to you being with us again. But for tonight, thank you for giving up your time and for all you do to make this city a better place. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much, seeing everybody. Have a great night. Sorry to run. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you. Rebecca, thanks for staying with us. So the water fee, and for those who are not familiar, I think we just need to start with some basic understanding of what that is for those who are hearing this for the first time, and then maybe go into what the status of it is at this time.
Absolutely. So the Water Collaborative for the last 3 years or so has been working very dedicatedly to create a stormwater fee for the city of New Orleans. Stormwater fees exist across the nation. They're becoming more popular because they're actually one of the most equitable ways to pay for drainage in any city. And currently, for those who may not have this context or know, right now drainage is paid for through property taxes. So most people pay, right? Residents certainly pay, small businesses pay, tax-paying entities pay for this. There are properties out there that are considered nonprofits or that are just tax exempt. They don't pay for drainage. And while it only equates for, and we got this data from the 2023 tax assessors rolls, only about 5.6, 5.9% of properties in the city are tax exempt. They account for what could be almost half of the, well, they account for what is almost half of the property value in this city. And so therefore we don't have the funding that we need, right? Half of the tax revenue that we could be collecting, we're not collecting on, a portion of which would go to drainage funding, right? And a lot of times these entities that aren't paying into drainage are the ones who overburden the system. For those who don't know, the Superdome doesn't pay property taxes. We know that that is complete concrete, right? They burden the system entirely, and they're not paying anything for drainage. The convention center, same thing. World War II museum, universities, their parking lots. There are a lot of different things that aren't paying for drainage that are burdening the system. So we have been working to create a stormwater fee that removes eventually people paying through property taxes, and everybody will pay their fair share in a stormwater fee for this. And if there's any other questions or context, Reverend Manning, that you want me to clarify or talk about before we get into the implications or the details, let me know.
Yeah, no, I think that's real good, and thank you for mentioning those examples so people will know, the big players in this. And what I learned from being a part of what the Water Collaborative is doing is permeable pavement as opposed to just the concrete that the Superdome may have, and all of that I think is very significant as well too.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, because I failed to mention it, is that we really see this stormwater fee as being holistic in how we use that money, how we use that funding. We would like it. Obviously, we do have great infrastructure issues, right? With the pipes, with the pumping stations, et cetera. We've talked about that. They do need repair. They need constant operations and maintenance, in which a portion of that should go to. But we also want to require a portion of the money to go to green infrastructure initiatives that you were just talking about, Reverend Manning. Things like permeable pavement, water retention methods across the city that are not just functional, but also beautiful and give people in the city places to go and recreate or just be in those spaces, essentially re-greening the city in a way that makes sense and reduces flooding.
Absolutely, totally needed, and as we look at the issues that we're facing now, let's go to where we at now with adopting this water fee.
Yeah, so like I said, we've been working on this for 3 years. We did research for the first 2 years with national partners, with local partners, with community members at the table, always throughout the process on best practices across the nation. Who has the best stormwater fees? What are they doing right? What can we incorporate into the unique needs of New Orleans? We did case studies from Philadelphia and Baltimore, Miami, and Milwaukee. They have had very successful stormwater fees, and so we've incorporated a lot of those ideas into our policy recommendations. We have, in May of last year, we officially launched our community campaign. So we already previously had a steering committee of Joe Giarrusso was actually on that steering committee, and a few other folks, a public advisory group, and a community engagement committee to sort of set us in the right direction, get feedback from them. Here's what we're thinking. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we're looking at. Do you think this is right for the city? And then we launched that into a full campaign. So we have knocked on over 10,000 doors in all 5 districts to get people's feedback. What do you think of this? Does this work for you? What are your priorities? What would you like to see out of this? We also did a 10-part workshop series in the spring of last year, actually inviting people in and asking them, here's the nitty gritty of what this could look like. Here are the issues. How would you solve this? Let's solve this together. And so we really incorporated all of that into our policy recommendations, which we officially put out after 2.5, 3 years of hard work in February of this year. So we were really excited to do that. You can go to waterjusticeneworleans.org to look at that. I'll put the info in the chat if you're more interested in our policies and what we're trying to accomplish here. Currently, we had a whole lot of momentum coming out of these policy recommendations in this press conference that we did in February. Unfortunately, because of the Sewage and Water Board task force, because of the governor sort of like changing things up, we don't know what's going to happen with the home rule charter necessarily. We don't know what's going to happen with Sewage and Water Board. We've been halted a little bit. We definitely have excitement from city council members. I'm not saying everybody's fully on board with everything, but they're excited to move some sort of stormwater fee forward. Other city agencies who are involved in this process, there has been movement, but I think right now everybody's taken a pause and sort of said, let's see what comes out of this task force. Let's see what happens with this constitutional convention and then move forward in a way that makes sense for New Orleans. And so that's where we are right now. We're still having conversations, but where we were hopeful that we could maybe get something on a ballot in November, we're maybe looking at next year to be able to do that.
Yeah. And with good reason. I think what you cited as halting it and slowing down the process, everybody can acknowledge that that is a good rationale for why we're not seeing it as quickly with what's going on with the present administration. I think whenever people hear the term fee of any sort, it causes concern, especially for people that are already heavily burdened, as we talked about in our previous conversation early on. And so people, certainly understand that there are big players who can pay more. But for those who are fixed incomes, those who are renters, those who have smaller properties, how will such a fee affect residents who are already struggling?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. So first I want to say, I mentioned that fees are one of the most equitable ways to pay for drainage. This is because when we are paying through property taxes, for example, basically you're taking a property's value and saying that's what you're going to pay into the system, right? It's not accounting for how much concrete do you have on your property, and what is that worth on the system? How is that burning the system? So a stormwater fee, the way that we are hoping to set it up, will actually look at the amount of impervious surface area, which is the concrete that's on your property, right? Concrete doesn't drink water. It's the stuff that drains away from your property, doesn't absorb that water. How much impervious surface area do you have on your property? And that's how much you will pay. We do have a tiered system for residents in particular because it makes sure that rates don't fluctuate often for residents. You know exactly what you're going to expect to pay versus commercial properties and multi-family residences that would pay based on like their entire property size. This is a standard practice across the nation in many cases and works out really well. And then for folks who this is a particularly hard financial burden for them, we are packaging into our recommendations incentives and credits as well as hardship exemptions. So if this is such a financial burden that you cannot pay it, that's okay. You can have a reduced rate. That's something that is affordable to you. And then in terms of incentives, we're hoping to put in grant programs using the money that's generated from the fee so that anyone can apply and say, I'd like to put green infrastructure on my property, right? I'd like to remove this concrete, put in a rain garden in my home. And it would give money to be able to do that so that that would also decrease the cost that you have, right? If you have more green infrastructure on your property, you'd pay a reduced fee. So there's a lot of ways that we're looking at this. Again, it's fair and equitable in the sense that if you have a lot of concrete, if you're a larger property, particularly for commercial properties, you would pay more. And if you're a smaller property and don't have a lot of concrete on your property, you pay less. So there's a fairness to it. And the fact that everybody has to pay into it, right? It's not just the people who are currently paying, means that there's more money available and it actually reduces the financial burden on residents and small businesses in particular.
All right.
And eventually
Thank you.
we'd like to see, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I should say too, we'd like to see, right now the millages are what's paying for that, the property taxes. We'd like to see that as residents are phased into the fee, we are phasing out the millages so that folks aren't paying double. That's really important to us. We don't want to see people paying two different kinds of payments for drainage. The whole point is to try to remove that burden for residents in particular.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that, Rebecca. I know there's some questions from those who are participating by Zoom. And so I'm going to see, Brooke, are you handling the questions tonight?
Hello, Pastor Manning.
Oh, Valerie, you're still there.
I'm the African side of Brooke. I'm Valerie.
I thought you were leaving, Val.
Okay. Yes, we have a question by Brooke. In fact, the Superdome is not a nonprofit, is it?
No, it is a state entity. So the state actually doesn't pay those property taxes. It's owned and controlled by the state under a stormwater fee, unless the state decides to be sneaky and make some changes where like they're not eligible for fees in some way, they would be required to pay this fee.
Okay, the next question we have from Lane. Lane, can you open your mic, please, and ask your question? You may want to explain it, then ask the question. Because I really believe that the city councilman, we did not discuss that.
Okay, and Rebecca, my question is about the actual sort of status, not, oh, it's about, we're 2 years away from getting the water meters installed. Beyond that, I mean, is anybody actually looking at, what is the problem? And everybody just keeps saying, oh, well, it's very difficult to get them installed. I want something more specific. Now, if you don't have that information, I totally understand. I'll need to address that question with Councilman Giarrusso, who I hope would have an answer. I mean, so, I know that there's the actual water meter, the new automated water meters that have to be connected. I know that there are also regional or neighborhood antennas that have to be tied together, and then that has to be tested and implemented with software. That's kind of, those are the parameters I'm looking for. If you don't have that, I understand. And
I don't have all of that, so I don't know the status of the antennas in particular. What I can say is I know, we say this 2-year period. They are currently installing right now. I think they've about 14,000 meters have been installed across the city, and they are trying to be a little bit sporadic about where they're installing those so that it's not all concentrated in one area, trying to be a little bit more equitable. They plan to do about 70,000 installations this year across the city. Whether or not they actually get to that, I can't speak to that, but that is their goal. They say they are on track for that. And then the remaining half, so we have about 40,000 meters in total across the city that need to be replaced. They say the next 70,000 will be replaced next year in 2025. And so that's where we hit that 2-year mark. I know as they are installing those meters, There are testing measures, you know, obviously from the factory to make sure that they're running correctly. When they get to Sewage and Water Board facility, they say that they're testing them to make sure they're running correctly and working correctly. And then when they're installed, they're actually testing them to make sure that they're working. They have said that, you know, meters are immediately, as soon as you get one installed, it's immediately working and it's on its way, it's going, right? So you're getting that bill, you're getting that accurate read. In August of this year, they've said that that app that comes along with that will be installed so that everybody can sign up to that portal and that app and actually see the water usage. And so I think this is a win, to be honest, for Sewage and Water Board and for residents, right? Smart meters can be a little bit of a double-edged sword because while it's good to have accuracy, we won't have any more billing disputes. Hopefully, we won't have any more estimates on our water. Prices will likely increase even incrementally for folks because it's catching every single drop of water. And that's something that hasn't happened with the manual meters that we've had as it is. The good thing with the app is that you'll be able to log on to that and see exactly how you're using water and when it's being used and the amount that's being used by the hour. So you can say, wow, I'm using a lot of water in the morning. Maybe I need to, why is that happening? We can account for that and find ways to mitigate that if that's a necessity for you. It'll also help with financial planning. There will be a way to like put in on the app, I want to spend $100 per month on my water bill. And you will actually get notifications as you get to that point where it's almost $100, you will get notifications. This is, hey, your bill is about to reach $100. Make some necessary changes if possible to be able to do that. So I'm sorry, Lane, that I can't answer all of your questions about the antennas and the implementation of software fully.
That's very helpful.
That is the information I have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question by Brooke. Brooke, want to ask?
Could I just slip in with this one and ask? I understood that that Landry had bought the water meter program and that he did not understand at the time that all the meters needed to be installed for any to work. So I'm curious by what you're saying about the fact that they're online immediately once they're installed, because I understood they weren't at all.
That's what Sewage and Water Board is saying. I have not had a smart meter installed, so I can't anecdotally say this is how it's working for me. But everybody who has had a smart meter installed is starting to get those bills immediately. They're starting to be read by the smart meter technology.
Okay. Great. Well,
Okay.
and the other one I guess that Valerie's pointing to is that I was wondering why, sorry, why we are not encouraging gray water use in this city. That is something that other cities are really pushing hard now. And I'm surprised that we're not also doing that, especially in a city that's very poor.
Yeah. And so are you saying the reuse of water in our system, recycling of water? I completely agree with that. And in fact, to add to that point, the fact that we push so much water out of this city, right, through the drainage system. I mean, we're pumping and you know, 100 years ago, that was a great thing because it was new technology. Now we're seeing the detriments of that, where it's causing subsidence, which is our land is sinking because we are literally we're too good at pumping water out of the city, right? And our water table is getting lower and lower and lower. And that means that our land with that is sinking and sinking and sinking, putting us below sea level. And so I agree with you, Brooke. I think we really need to be incorporating more of that use of water. Why are we just pumping it away and dumping it into Lake Pontchartrain or dumping it into the Mississippi River instead of utilizing it in a way that's beneficial for people? So for folks who don't know, gray water use is taking water that isn't necessarily potable. It's not drinkable water, but using it in ways that make sense for the city so that we're not just using all of this fresh water, clean water for uses that don't necessarily need to go to that. And I would love to see more of that.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
especially
for explaining gray water.
Especially in a place where we like to irrigate or, you know, to water plants and things all the time. So
thank you. Okay, we have a question by Liz. Liz, do you want to ask your question? Liz want you to answer the question about the small churches on a corner. How will this plan affect small corner churches?
Yeah, no, I understand the question and
Okay.
you know, yeah, so I think essentially, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, you're asking about how does the stormwater fee impact the churches, right? Especially smaller churches who maybe don't have a lot of money. If it impacts them the same way it would residents, except the fact that because most of them are nonprofits, they haven't been paying anything for drainage, so it would be a new fee that would need to be incorporated. There would need to be a little bit of financial planning for this. But again, if it's a hardship for nonprofits such as small churches, there's an exemption that can be had. There's ways to reduce that fee over time. So these grant and incentive programs as well, they're not just for residents, they're for nonprofits, they're for businesses to put this in. We would like to see for commercial properties, and for us, commercial properties also includes, that's a sort of a blanket term that we're saying for non-residential, right? So that includes nonprofits as well, a sort of sunsetting effect for hardship exemptions. We you know, this is, again, these are recommendations. This is not something that's all set in stone, but essentially about a 3 to 5 year period would exist so that you would have 3 to 5 years to financially plan, get that hardship exemption, and incorporate that stormwater fee into your finances and what you can afford and what you need. For residents, it would be extended always. If you cannot afford the stormwater fee, that exemption is available to you. Does that answer your question, Liz?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm on board now with my iffy voice. Lane has another question. That is, what opposition on the stormwater fee are you getting from, one, the governor, B, the legislators on behalf of the state, municipal and state properties now exempt, Catholic Church, educational nonprofits, Tulane, etc.?
Yeah, this is a great question, Lane, and I will say I'll answer each of these. So to A, the governor, we haven't seen any opposition. We just switched governors too, so we don't know exactly where he stands, but we do know when his task force came out, they said we need a stormwater fee. In fact, a couple of our partners who we've worked with who were on the task force, they were the proponents of, like, we need a stormwater fee for the city. So I don't think at the state level, even from legislators, that we're getting much opposition currently. And in fact, our next level of engagement is to continue talking with legislators. We've been talking very much at a local community level to just get that community input and that community buy-in. We also want to talk to our legislators and say, hey, here's what we want to do. How do you feel about this? What concerns do you have about this, particularly when it comes to legislation and how legislation may be impacted by the stormwater fee, or the stormwater fee impacted by legislation, I should say. The Catholic Church, we've actually not heard any rumblings from the Catholic Church. We knew that that could be an issue potentially in this city. They know of our plan. Certainly they know that we want to do this. We also know that a precedent has been set. I think it was in Pennsylvania or Baltimore. The Catholic Church actually sued the city because of a stormwater fee, saying we should be exempt from this. We should not have to pay this. And they did not win that case. This is a fee. This is not a tax. So they had to pay into the fee. So a precedent has been set for this. And as far as like educational nonprofits like Tulane, for example, also haven't heard anything, any rumblings of being concerned or any opposition for this. And in fact, we've heard from some Tulane folks that are interested in this proposal in particular. They want to know how it works. They want to learn more. People really just want to learn more about it right now. And I think when it comes to like the Catholic Church and Tulane and Ochsner, for example, in these institutions, right, in New Orleans, who, you know, are sort of here for the community, on behalf of the community, work with the community, right? It's a bad look to say, well, we don't want to pay a stormwater fee, right? We don't want to help you financially in this city to get that done, to beautify this city, to reduce flooding, to improve quality of life. That is not a good look. And so that's something that we're sort of pushing with them as well. And I think that they know that. So we're excited to see where this goes.
And sure Tulane, of course, has a big environmental group.
They do. Yeah.
So how does it actually get enacted? Is it enacted then by a city council resolution, or does it something that has to be passed by Orleans residents, Orleans voters? It's not something that has to be voted on by the state, is it?
No, it doesn't have to be voted on by the state. This would be, the way we're advocating for it, there will be two public votes that need to be had. So as of last year, state legislation that was passed last year, we do need to go to a public vote to enact a stormwater fee for the city. Not to enact a stormwater utility, a group that actually manages all of this, but the fee itself needs to be voted on by the public. So that's number one. That's really important, why we need that community buy-in. We can't just get city council's buy-in on this and say the community wants it. It will have to go to a vote. It'll have to be on a ballot measure. So that's the one of the pieces to it. The other one is that we tried working with Sewage and Water Board to get back on Sewage and Water Board. We tried working with them on this stormwater fee, saying, obviously for gray infrastructure, you will need some of this money. You know, let's see what we can do together. We were on the same page for a really long time until it came down to governance, because we know the public does not trust Sewage and Water Board. They have not used their money wisely, right? There's no transparency in how they use money. We know that they cannot be the entity that actually houses the fee, that collects this fee and uses that money. At the same time, right, we said we wanted it to be holistic. So while a portion of that would go to Sewage and Water Board for operations and maintenance, a portion of that also needs to go to parks and parkways, for example, to maintain and implement green infrastructure initiatives. It needs to go to NORD or NORA, I can't remember who does the community adaptation program, for example, that puts green infrastructure on properties around the city, right? So there's a lot of places this needs to go. And so we have been advocating for a separate entity. For us, that means likely under the Office of Resilience and Sustainability, which would become a department, to house this fee, to administer the money, and to get it where it needs to go. And create a little bit more oversight so that not all of it goes to Sewage and Water Board. So we have parted ways with them in this because, of course, they want all the money all the time. They want control of everything. But in order to create this new Department of Resilience and Sustainability, we will also need another ballot measure to be voted on by the public, because it's a change to the Home Rule Charter, essentially, to create a department out of this.
Lane's last question.
Would that be a
Well-
department under the mayor?
It wouldn't be under the mayor anymore, right? So the offices are under the mayor. This would be a permanent city department that exists, same as Department of Public Works, et cetera.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Pastor Manning, you were,
No, I was trying to see if we had another question.
yes, we have one more question from Lane, and that is on the proposed fee. You mentioned that it would be based on how much impervious surface, sorry.
Mhm.
Sorry.
You want me to ask the question, Brooke?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I just didn't understand. You said it was going to, I got the sense that you were saying it will start with how much impervious surface you have.
Mhm.
Does that mean there's no accounting for what's the value of the property?
Correct. Mhm.
Oh, so you
Which is-
take how much impervious surface you have,
Mhm. The
and
size of your property and the amount of impervious surface area on that property. But
so
it does not include home value, because in many ways that's inequitable too, right? Each neighborhood, you could have the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, square footage in one neighborhood, and the price for that, the home value, is vastly different than in another neighborhood, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of inequity. So it wouldn't account for that at all.
So can you is there some way you can quickly kind of walk us through then, what would it look like, that little calculation? It would be how much property you have,
Mhm.
and then a percentage for how much of that is impervious surface.
Yes, so let me step back for a second. There's two ways to calculate this. There would be a way for residents in particular, a 3-tiered system that's essentially based on your property size. That is done because there are so many residential properties in the city. It would take a lot of calculations on behalf of the city to try to get the exact right number. It could also fluctuate, depending on what happens year to year for residents, and create some confusion in how much you actually have to pay in a fee. So for residents, and again, I think I mentioned, this is a standard best practice that happens. There's like a 3-tiered rate. If you own a small property, and we think this makes sense too, right? Because we have shotgun style properties, we have those medium residential sized properties, and then we have larger properties in this city too. And so basically it would come down to like, which category of those do you fit into? Those ranges, whether it's from, 2,500 square feet and below is your property size, or 2,500 to 4,500. We know that there's a median range out there around 33,000. 3,300 square feet as a residential property size. And so you would fit into one of those categories, and that would be your fee. The other way of calculating it for everybody else who isn't a single family residential property is to pay based on impervious surface area. So if you own, 5 acres of land, 5,000 square feet of property, and it's basically just a field, you're really not paying a whole lot because it's a field, right? There's no impervious surface area. If you own, a property about worth that much, but you have, maybe 2,200 square feet of impervious surface area, there's this thing called an equivalent residential unit, which I can give you more info. You can read more about that in a report, which I will send out for folks. But it's basically like a percentage of something that you multiply that number by the amount of square feet you have, and then that's how much you pay.
So somebody like the World War II Museum, which as far as I can tell is almost entirely concrete.
Correct.
And occupies a lot of land.
Correct.
They'd have a great big whopping fee amount to pay, right?
They would, yes, yeah.
And so would all the municipal and state stuff like the convention center.
Absolutely.
Superdome.
The Superdome.
That's where I'm looking to see, where do we get pushback from the governor who's already looking at a hole in his budget next year? Anyway, I've asked my question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one more question, and that is, how do you keep landlords from using this as a moment, to increase rents for all the tenants, when actually it may be that their water bills go down, right? Or their drainage bill goes down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that's been a phase 2 conversation, some of these little nitty grittier details about when we're actually putting the policy into an ordinance and writing it out, and what does that look like, that we're still working out.
Okay.
As I mentioned, these are, recommendations moving forward to the best of our ability. We've accounted for so much that we can.
Yes.
And so, how are renters or landlords gonna react to this is, a different issue what they do, but that is something that we are thinking about throughout this process.
Okay. Thank you. I knew
Yeah.
you would be, but
All
But
right,
this
is
is
that
the
the
kind of stuff I would just like to say too, that we love getting feedback on, because there may be something that we are not necessarily thinking about. So we
No.
love to hear back from community members and be like, well, what about this? What about that? And we can incorporate that into how we move forward with this process. So thank you all
Great.
very much. for the
good. Thank
questions.
you for making me feel unstupid.
Oh, you're not at all. All of these have been great questions. I've really appreciated it.
and I think Rebecca, I think what piece I'm missing is just understanding the amount of the fee. I understand how it works, how it's calculated, but a fee could mean $1.50 for each person as a baseline, or it could mean thousands of dollars. Okay, so I have a home that's 2,300 square feet. Most of my property around my house is permeable, soil, but I have a small driveway and some pavement on a walkway. We best case estimate. What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Reverend Manning. We are looking at, first of all, what we need to look at is our needs, right? We need to know how much money we actually have to generate, the gap that we are filling with a stormwater fee, before we even look at what does it need to cost per people, right? Like, because we don't want to implement something and say, here's what people are going to pay, and then it's not enough, right? Why are we doing this if it's not enough, if it's not actually going to cover the cost of the operations and maintenance of the gray infrastructure gaps that we have in funding, of the green infrastructure initiatives that we want, the grant programs that we want to install for residents and for businesses, right? Like we need to know how much money that costs. So that is one of the phase 2 conversations that we're having. We are looking based on conversations and data that we already have. We know we need at least $40 million per year to cover those costs in a stormwater fee. We'd like to see upwards of $60 million per year if we could in those costs. So we're working with those numbers. What does that look like? We put together some different data points. And again, they're in our report for those who are interested and want to look at different scenarios. If we had a $10 per ERU stormwater fee versus a $30 ERU versus what does that number look like to generate what we need to generate? What we have found out is that we are looking at a cost of maybe around $30 per ERU. So that's that like equivalent, right? So if the ERU is $2,500, you know, or I'm sorry, 2,500 square feet of area, and that's one ERU, then to your point of view, you know, you have 2,300 square feet of your property in your residential unit, you'd be paying about one ERU. You'd be paying about $30 per month for this essentially. So we're still, again, that's not set in stone. We are looking at what this is actually going to cost us, what our actual needs are. And again, it's not totally up to us, right? It's up to city council and what they want to write into the ordinance. And then it's up to the public to say, we want this, we think we need this. So.
Yeah. And it's good to know about those hardship grants and, you know, opportunities as well, too, because you know, for those on fixed incomes, $30 is a lot when you have to make choices between medication and putting food on the table and transportation and all of that. So a lot to be considered, and it sounds like y'all taking that all into account.
Yes. Yeah. And the goal is something we've always said in this, whatever you are paying in property taxes right now that are contributing to drainage, with this fee, we are hoping will be less than that. It will actually be, you know, the millages that you're paying right now are actually probably more than you think. Most people think they're paying. I certainly know when I look at my property taxes, I don't go through and do the calculations for, well, there's 6 mil for this, and what is that equivalent, plus 9 mil for this, and like how much am I actually spending for drainage? But the goal, the idea is that actually this fee, even per month to the annual amount, will be less than what you actually pay in property taxes right now for drainage. Again, we can do that because new entities are paying into the system that haven't currently been paying. And it's those bigger ones that Brooke was mentioning, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that. Very good answer. All right. Are there any burning questions before we close up?
I have a quick one. I have no cement on my property, absolutely none. And I put in like 8 trees on my property. And I'm wondering if I get money back. No, I'm just kidding. Are they going to pay me? That's what I want to know.
I love that question. And what I can say is, like, we've had a serious capacity questions around that where, well, I have this and I have that. And this is a collective need, right? We all pay for drainage, even the way we pay it right now. And I'm not saying this just to you, Brooke. I'm saying so everybody walks away with this understanding is that this is something we pay into to benefit the entire community, not just ourselves. And so that's how people really need to be thinking about this fee, is that it's a total community benefit to the entirety of New Orleans, and not just based on what do I get for this because of what I do on my property is. Yeah.
Precisely.
It's kind of like the whole discussion around public education, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, I don't have a kid in school, so why am I paying for this?
That's right. But I think we should all get our shovels out and start digging up everybody's cement, even if, at night, even, you know, we'll just dig.
Urban Conservancy has a great program, Front Yard Initiative. You may or may not be familiar with it, but I'm going to plug them because Dana and the work she's doing is amazing. They will tear that concrete up for you. Yes.
It sort of comes and goes though, doesn't it?
Rebecca, I have one quick question. What is the approximate percentage, if you could just say a median or an average percentage of property tax that goes to sewage and water?
It's really hard to calculate. I can't give a percentage. I will say there are 3 different millages, 3 mil, 6 mil, and 9 mil, which this will make no sense to anybody, including us who do this work. All equals 16 mil in total. If you do that math, it is not 16, but that's what it comes out to. I don't have the exact numbers for how they're calculating that out of your property taxes. But I think there are resources out there that I can forward to this group if
Thank
needed.
you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you so much for all of your knowledge and insight and input on all of the conversations that we've had tonight, and for the incredible work that you're doing. Would you leave us with some closing thoughts and anything that we need to know moving forward?
Oh my goodness. I will say that all of these issues are so intertwined together, especially when it comes to water and water justice issues, right? We've been talking a lot about Sewage and Water Board and the faults of Sewage and Water Board and the billing issues that we have, the drainage issues we have, how we want to fix that with a drainage fee, all these different things. Yeah, I think there's even more to it, right? The affordability of water in particular, right? Like, how is that calculated? How are we seeing water affordability go when we're talking about industrial pollution or agricultural pollution, municipal pollution? How is that impacting water affordability, for example? Then water affordability, to your point, Reverend Manning, if people can't afford their water and they're having to choose between having water in their homes or prescription medications or food or whatever that looks like, what does that mean for the health of a community in total? And so their water impacts everything is what I think I want to leave with people, right? If we don't have clean, safe, affordable water, if we don't have ways to safely and affordably remove water from our city, if we're not learning to live with water, it doesn't matter what our education system looks like, because nobody can afford to live here and it's flooding and we're all drowning, right? Essentially in that, or we're moving away. It doesn't matter what our police system looks like. It doesn't matter what our housing crisis is. Water is one of the first steps, especially for a city like New Orleans, where we get inundated by water so often, that we really need to be taking care of and we really need to be looking at. And everybody should be an advocate for clean, safe, affordable water. And that's what I really want to leave you with. I also am going to put our Water Justice New Orleans link in the chat for those who want to know more about the stormwater fee, maybe some confusion in my answers, something that I haven't answered. Please go to this website. You're also welcome to email me. I am putting my email in the chat, rebecca@nolawater.org, for those who are interested in following up about anything that we do. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate you being here tonight. And certainly you make a really wonderful point about, having to learn how to live with water, because if we don't, nothing else matters. I say the same thing as we look at the impact of climate change upon our city. If we don't start, and certainly they are both linked and tied together, unable to be uncoupled. But if we don't start looking at the impact of climate change and how to mitigate it, and each doing our own part, then no other conversation matters. And certainly as we see storms get worse and worse, we see these downpours happening on a more regular basis, we have to figure this thing out. And all hands on deck, everybody has a role in doing that. So thank you for all you're doing. We appreciate you, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for sticking around and listening to me dribble on about all this stuff.
You're great, Rebecca. We appreciate you. Anybody, do we have any announcements before we close? I know there's a few of us left, but are there any announcements anybody has? All right. I hear none. So let me just bless you as you go your way tonight. There's supposed to be some heavy rain coming. Get your car on the neutral ground to make sure you're safe, and look out for one another. So may God bless you tonight as you rest. God keep us safe from all hurt, harm, and danger. Keep us ever understanding that we're in this together. And that there is hope as we put our creative minds together. And we just thank you for those that have been able to come together at one table and come up with great solutions that are unique, but that they've looked at other cities and what they're doing as best practices, and sought to utilize those here in our own city. God, help us to just rebuild in a significant way and put into place new structures that will best serve all people with equity and not showing partiality to any one person or group of people. We ask this all in the mighty name of our Creator and Lord. Amen. All right, everybody. Thanks again for being here. God bless you all. Have a good night.